So, hello everyone. I'm Colleen Benelli. I'm here with my daughter Robin. Hi, Robin.
Hello.
And our guest today, Jules Davis. I'm so excited to have you back, Jules.
I'm excited to be here again. Thank you.
Me too. And this is the Reiki Lifestyle Podcast. So, I think you find everything about us on ReikiLifestyle.com, upcoming classes, weekly distance Reiki shares that are free and online, podcast information, resources, things like that. Anyway, let's get right to it and talk about Jules. So we have had Jules on the podcast before, so you can look her up then also. And she's going to be sharing about her story today. Jules is a colleague. We work together as licensed teachers for the ICRT. She is also a highly qualified and very experienced professional psychic and medium. So she's also an ICRT licensed Yusui, Karuna, and Animal Reiki Master, Master Crystal Healer, Sound Healer, Medical Intuitive, Animal Communicator, and she's the owner of Auralux in Redondo Beach, California. She's been featured on BuzzFeed, Ease, The Platinum Life, Super Deluxe, Mixed Makeup, LATV, and in Sunset Magazine. And her her website is Healing with Jules. Jules is Jules, healingwithjules.com. And that's also Medium Jules for Instagram and TikTok. So, with all of that said, and of course, it's always in all of our show notes. With all of that said, Jules, hello. Let's go ahead and get right to it and um, connect in with you. And Jules and I have known each other for a long time, but actually, we haven't talked for a couple of months at least. So we want to catch up with the topics we were talking about honestly before the recording started. So we'll go ahead and just let you catch us up and, your story and where you are now.
Sure. Yeah, I feel like normally when we are like, oh, let's have a catch-up phone call, it turns into a 3-hour phone call
Right.
easily.
It does.
So it's probably because we're not talking enough. But anyway, it's nice to be here with the both of you. Thank you for having me on as a guest again. What we were talking about earlier is something that I feel compelled to talk about because I'm sure a lot of people can relate to it. So I've had a pretty difficult last few years, I would say personally, and I'm always looking, as a individual, how to heal myself. So what's been coming up a lot for me has been issues around the root chakra. And as I explore that more and more, it's coming up in my sessions with clients, or it's coming up with my classmates or class students, and really exploring maybe things that have happened in our life that were beyond our control. Maybe they're traumatic experiences that we've had because of, you know, life, who we chose as parents, maybe because of classmates that we've had, siblings that we've had. Maybe it's something totally beyond anybody's control, like a traumatic birth. That's what we were talking about a little bit earlier, and how that can have an effect on patterns that are created in our lives. So I really like, as a practitioner, to look at how can I help this person heal, but on all levels, like get to the root of the issue, root cause healing, so to speak. And so when we're looking at that, it could be something that's happened in this lifetime, something from a past lifetime. I know you work a lot with spirit release, which I do too. That could be some spirit attachment stuff that we've picked up, especially those of us who tend to be more empathic or sensitive. If we're not, careful, we can pick up energies. There could be so many different reasons for why we have the patterns and experiences that we have in life. And for me, safety has always been a really big issue. And I know I tend to attract a lot of students and clients that have a similar issue. So, safety meaning not feeling safe, like in various situations, maybe victim of a crime, or I've had multiple car accidents that were other people's fault, so to speak, and different kinds of traumas. I won't go into too much detail in case it triggers people, but I've had quite an exceptional life in the trauma department, I would say. And all of those situations tend to bring up over and over again this issue about not feeling safe. And with that, I feel like there's tentacles of some of these issues. Could be not feeling like you belong, or feeling rejected by people, or all sorts of other things that kind of go hand in hand with, do I feel safe? And so I've been exploring that a lot with myself and ancestral lineage stuff, and how some of that is epigenetics and coming through. Some of my family are survivors of the Holocaust and war, stuff, or abusive family members, or other things that is bringing up the safety pattern within my own family. Some of it is experiences that I've had in this lifetime, and other stuff is past life stuff that I'm like carrying with me that is still having an effect on me. So you bring all of that stuff together, and it's like, oh, there's a lot of stuff to work on there. And the root chakra is, what connects us a lot to our past lives, our ancestral stuff, and is the foundation for us feeling grounded, safe, belonging, all of those different things. It can also affect our weight. I've struggled with my weight a lot throughout the years. Weight gain can be a root chakra issue. Immune system stuff can be a root chakra issue, or circulatory system. There's so many different things. Our kidneys, our adrenal glands, so many of us are burnt out or fatigued because of life, just being life and lifing for us. So it's just something that I started to really explore deeply within myself. And then that kind of has expanded a lot with people. Do you want me to keep talking about that?
Well,
Sure.
I was gonna ask real quick, Jules, can you explain the root chakra in a little bit more detail? Because not everybody, especially if you're new to, Reiki or spirituality, can hear about the chakras and not know which each one means. So can you
Sure.
explain just a little bit more about the root chakra?
Yeah, so we have a whole bunch of chakras. Different people have different opinions about how
Yeah.
many chakras exist. But most of us are at least starting to explore or be familiar with the seven main chakras. And in the seven main chakras, the root chakra is the base chakra, or the foundation. It's located at the very bottom of our spine, so in the coccyx area, our tailbone area. And this can have an effect on our legs, our knees, our feet, really our foundation, connecting us to the earth. And it governs a lot of different things, but most importantly, if we look at safety, feeling safe, feeling like we belong or are part of a tribe. So, who is our tribe? A lot of us are looking for that, especially when we're spiritual people. Sometimes you can feel like, I don't know where I belong because I don't know who to talk to about the experiences that I'm having. So, that can also be just a thing that people who are more sensitive spiritually never feel quite like they belong with their friend group or other people in their family who might not have the same experiences. It's shelter and our basic needs. So if you ever had difficulty with those basic needs being met, maybe having a roof over your head at some point in your life, financial stuff can be tied into the root chakra. So, any big financial issues, if you were in a household when you grew up where there wasn't a lot of financial security, that can have an effect on us. If you've gone through anything in your life where you lost a lot of money, there could be all different kinds of things there. And
Yeah.
when we look at it, it can also affect the earliest stages of our childhood development. So, like from birth stuff to the first year or two of our life. If anything big happened or came up during that time for us, it can definitely shape the energy connected to the root chakra. On a physical level, it can affect a bunch of things like our immune system, which I mentioned, our circulatory system. Obviously, it's the base of our spine, so it's our foundation for our spinal column. And I mentioned the legs and the feet and the knees. So if you have any difficulties with any of those areas, that can be bringing something up into your attention. For men, it can be their male parts, it can be affected. It's also our masculine expression. So everybody has, masculine and feminine energy. It can be our masculine expression and how that's being expressed or not being expressed in the world. There's so many different components to it,
Yeah,
but I think
of
that
course.
gives you like a basic understanding. But really, most importantly, do we feel grounded? Do we feel like we belong? Am I safe? Am I in the right place? Those kinds of things are things that we can look at. Even so much as like I was 11 years old when I moved to the United States, and just the adjustment of that coming from a totally different, not just a different country. I mean, Canada's not that far out there, but it is like a big change, a big adjustment. Going into a small, tiny private school from the school that I was in, where I was like dressed in, esprit and keds. That was like the style coming from the 80s into the early 90s. And then I'm at this like hippie school, and everybody's looking at me funny because I'm dressed a little too preppy, just little things like that. But do you belong? You're around all these new people. I've even been exploring this with some of my clients who immigrated to the United States and what their experiences were through their immigration process, trying to figure out how to belong in a totally new place, or people that maybe had army families or military families and they had to constantly move, what that did. Do I feel like I belong? Am I grounded where I live? All these different kinds of things. When you start to open up that window, it's like quite significant different areas of our life that this can affect and have an impact on.
It's also, I just want to add the color red, the red
Oh, yeah.
chakra. When you see the, the colors, the violet is the crown and the red is the root. So,
Yeah.
which in a lot of practices, red is protection as well. So, there's other, meanings to the color red, of course, but I
Yeah.
just wanted to, for those of you that see the chakra colors often, and that can get a little convoluted, which is which. So it's the red one at the bottom.
Thank you for that
Yeah.
basic.
Well, I love the topic too, because I would say that I don't know for myself that I've always really landed on, oh, those are root chakra things, or
Mm,
oh, that's what this is. And, reflecting on my own life and, the same, that's that, what areas were affected and how that root chakra was affected, and how it also, that sense of safety, then can also affect the other parts of you. And one of them that, we always do for everybody listening, we do an invocation before we even start the recording, and always very aware of our purpose here is to activate our authentic voice on behalf of the listeners so that you guys are hearing things that are beneficial. And I caught it today for myself of like that kind of little catch in my voice,
mm,
and thinking about it with the, translating that, even though we think of that as throat chakra, translating it to root chakra, because in that safety factor, are you safe to speak up?
mhm,
Are you safe to use your voice? Do you even know what your voice is? And I think for me, that's been a big part of my Reiki journey, is really, first of all, learning how to hear myself. And then also that culturally created self, because of my age and my generation. What could women speak in my age and my generation? Where was our voice? And even what did I know about my own voice? Also from my childhood, with my father was a very rageaholic, so there was not really any using my voice in that category. And we also moved. My mom was kind of just moved all the time. We would
mm.
move. By the time I was 20, I think it was, I had moved 22 times.
Wow. Yeah. That's a big deal.
It is. Fortunately for me, I was never shy, so I was able to kind of adapt more quickly. But I know for my brothers, they both had were very challenged by moving that much. And so I guess as I'm speaking, and we said we'd just be conversational, I had not related some of those things to root chakra and safety and that belonging, that sense of belonging. Because I hear so many people, I would say that is a very big theme in our communities and with our clients and students and colleagues, and that sense of belonging. And especially because we're the bridge generations of returning some of these practices and some of these ways back into normalcy and safety. So, Robin, I can see you're trying to, I thought you looked like you were trying to pop in.
No, I was sneezing actually.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I would say as a practitioner and as a teacher, my number one priority is to make people feel safe and comfortable, and seen and heard goes with that, right? Because so many places we don't feel seen and we don't feel heard and listened to, and all of that kind of stuff. So it also comes up through that. My sensitivity to it is very profound. And the other thing I would add is that often those of us who do have issues around safety, or there was abuse in the home, or there was whatever going on, tend to be the people pleasing type. We tend to be the empaths as well, the more sensitive kind of people that can take that on and embody that. And that can lead to all sorts of health issues for us as well if that stuff is not resolved. So the root chakra being our foundation, our base, some people call it the base chakra, our foundation, and that can have an effect on every other aspect of our energy. So if the root chakra is out of alignment, that really is quite profound and significant. For me, the last couple years, I had really difficult and challenging housing issues, like back to back, just multiple housing issues. And while I could explain them away as, these people suck and all of that kind of stuff, I was more looking within of, okay, what am I attracting here? Why is this going on? What do I need to heal within myself? And that's when I really started to explore all these dimensional layers of my own healing and what this could be connected with. For example, my family was kicked out of their homes in, Europe, the Jewish families and stuff like that. And just looking at the Holocaust and what they went through and all the things that they lost, for example, in both sides of the family, there are situations like that that force them to flee in order to survive. Survival is a very much root chakra, and also just a basic thing for like humans to experience, right? And so when we're fleeing or we're in that place of survival, and there's all sorts of different ethnic groups, religions, races that are having this experience, it's not unique to my ancestry. But what forced us to flee and what did they go through? There's so many different like wars happening currently in the world and previously in the world, or there's natural disasters or whatever the case may be that inspired us, that we didn't feel safe and pushed us out from our homes and then had to go somewhere else and tried to fit in and tried to belong, and maybe had to change in order to belong and that kind of stuff. It was just a really interesting exploration that I started going on to explore what is my stuff and why am I attracting this housing stuff. And then safety just kept coming up over and over again. And this ancestral connection to it as well, of my ancestors not being safe where they were, in their lives and stuff like that.
I think, Jules, on a kind of expanded idea of what you're talking about and looking into those ancestral aspects of it, it's one of the things that when you're going through really challenging time frames, and when you're going through um, even dark nights of the soul type time frames and cycles, and I think we all have them in our lifetime. It's one of the reasons that I really appreciate being able to navigate them through these practices, whether it's Reiki, whether it's spiritual practices, because you do get to look deeper into them. You experience them, I would say, in a slightly different way. You look at these really big aspects of whether it's your life experience, this life, whether it's ancestral history, whether it's past lives, whether it's, talking about that root chakra, whether you've moved in this lifetime or this is one of your relatively first lifetimes on this planet, and, talk about needing to belong, that you get to explore these from such a different place. There's support in a way through the spiritual aspects that we have, or Reiki, that can help us look at them in a deeper level and look at them. I say this often because I've been through a pretty challenging cycle myself. And I say this because it's like, thank God I have these practices through them, because you're going to go through them whether or not you have them. And it's just so helpful because, like you said, you're able to look at that at a deeper level and look at that. I know when I was going through it, I just learned such a deeper level of compassion for not just myself, but also other people who navigate challenging cycles, through the people around me, in different ways. And with you, I know that it's more multidimensional than this, but being able to like look at that ancestral aspect for you is huge. And so it's one of the things that I think is so beneficial about these practices. And not just being able to look at it to kind of understand why it's happening, but also going into that healing aspect of it, because it's like it changes you from kind of those moments forward. And also descendants, whether they're, any sort of children or not, like we all have this collective idea of descendants. And as a practitioner, like being able to hold space for your clients as they're navigating this and understanding it at a deeper level, because you're also traversing this space.
Mhm. Yeah, definitely. I feel like I don't know if it's my scorpionic nature. I'm a Scorpio and I want to like get to the root of everything and know everything and understand everything and go under the covers, so to speak. But yeah, I'm always looking for how deep I can go, not to judge anything or criticize anything, but really just to observe what is this connected to and how can I heal it? So if I was working with a client, and something difficult came up, maybe about their childhood, it's not to criticize their parents or beat them up. It's really just to acknowledge that these difficult things happened so that we can let them go. And what I often find is that people go, oh, well, that was a long time ago, or, oh, we've healed our relationship now. And I'm like, well, if it's coming up, I think this part is unhealed and we need to work on that, and it's okay to acknowledge that that happened, because I think a lot of people don't want to always look into the darker parts of their life, or the more painful parts of their life, because that can be quite painful to uncover that stuff. But I am quite comfortable going in there. I don't know, again, if it's my scorpionic nature or just my own character or who I am as a person, but I like digging into that stuff. And I do it with myself. So I'm my own guinea pig. Like, okay, what do we have to work on here? And how do we go into that a little deeper? And then I notice that it will come up with clients, or that I'll experience something really challenging, and then I look at it later and I'm like, oh, this is really going to help my clients now because I have this awareness, or I had this experience, or, I do a lot of medical intuitive work and I've had a lot of health challenges myself. And every time I'm like learning something new about how the body works, or something, some new helpful tool with that. And I'm like, oh, this is going to help my clients. For example, I had this terrible mold situation in my unit, not this one that I'm living now, but previously, that I had to move out of very abruptly. And, it was this huge stressful experience. But as I was learning more about the mold and about how it was affecting my body and all this stuff, all of a sudden I'm working on people and I'm like, oh, you have water damage and I can tell you where it is in your home. And by the way, you've got mold in your body and this and this and this. And it's like, this one lady said I saved her life because she's been going to doctor after doctor, not getting to the root of what it was. And she didn't even know she had mold. She went and looked in the place where I told her to look. And sure enough, there was major water damage in her attic area. And and then it was something that she could be empowered to resolve. So that's really how I look at it, is by looking at the root cause stuff. Is it feels empowering to know. Like a lot of times we don't know, why do I do this, or why is this my pattern, or why do I have this issue, and we just are stuck in the why place. But if you actually start to understand it, then we can feel empowered, like, oh, I can overcome this because I know what it is. I can identify it as something. You don't have to know everything. You don't have to rehash every painful experience or memory. That's not what I'm talking about. But just understanding what it came from or what it's connected to, I think is really important and powerful. Colleen and I were talking before we started the podcast about, like, for example, even my birth was a very traumatic birth. It was a home birth, and that wasn't the problem. It was 1979. It was pretty, like, my mom was pretty hip, actually. There was a lot of stuff going on. And I was featured in the newspaper because I was a home birth, but it was a very stressful birth. I was born face down and backwards. So, like, feet first and face down. And that was really stressful on her physically. So I came into this world and we got separated right away. They had to take me from her because she was in a place where they needed to pay a lot of attention to her. And I was also needing attention immediately when I came out of her womb. And just imagine that as such a stressful, entering onto this earth. It was very stressful. And so I've been looking at that too as part of where my safety issues are, but where, like, chronic stress is just so almost comfortable to me that sometimes I don't realize that I'm in this heightened state of stress. If you want to talk about the fight or flight mode, that's also very much connected to this root chakra stuff. And so, for those of us who haven't switched it off yet, because we're just in this perpetual state of stress, or these issues keep coming up over and over for us that are stressful, learning how to heal the vagus nerve and how to, like, get out of that fight, flight, freeze, or fawn mode is also super important. And Reiki has been really instrumental in helping me to navigate that, and also to calm down my nervous system when it's going totally haywire from issues. I've decided to call adversities or challenging experiences adventures now, and that totally changes the
Say
energy of
that
it.
again.
I say I'm on an adventure, and that just
Oh,
changes the energy of, like, the stressful experience, that it's now I'm on an adventure and let's see where the adventure takes me. And, and then it just changes the energy instead of being in that victim mentality. When my mom passed away quite a few years ago now, but she had a huge collection of books. And I remember this one book she had, and I need to, like, locate it, but it was the archetypes and the chakras, and looking at it from, like, a psychological perspective and stuff, and the different archetypes. And the negative expression of the root chakra was victim. So if you think about that, whether it's, intentional or unintentional, usually unintentional, whether we've been a victim of child abuse, sexual abuse, etc., um, those things tend to come up for us over and over again, going back to the safety thing, where we're the victim of a crime, of a car accident, of a whatever. And that stuff just keeps happening over and over again until you find a way to heal that pattern of being a victim. Is that
well, let's get to that part of it, the how to in the healing of it. Because I know for me it's popping off with, oh, I relate this, I relate this, I relate this in my own life, and then also, of course, with different clients. Like you say, um, when we have clients, it seems like, or when we have our personal issues, it does seem as if it does attract clients with the same things going on. And I mentioned just recently where I had almost 2 years of clients coming in that immediately from what they started to share, I knew they were Irish heritage or Irish ancestry. And a lot of the belief or experience of suffering in that ancestry. And of course, that was also healing in me. And I remember talking to my teacher about it at the time and how what that's doing is for all of us, it's actually doing a healing on the collective around it from multiple perspectives. So at first I was really, and I'm saying this for any of you that are practitioners and are having that happen, because at the time I thought, well, am I just making this up? Like, why is it that client after client after client is showing up with similar issues, but perhaps a completely different perspective of it? And so, also understanding in some of my own work with that, not only did I have past lives where I was, quote unquote, the victim of something, I was also the perpetrator. So I had both sides of it in other lifetimes. So anyway, I was just thinking of it as we're talking, people are probably relating a lot of their own stories. So let's go into some of the how-to with it. Oh, Robin, you look
Yeah, I
like,
wanted to just add a few things to what you're
okay.
saying before we go into the how-to. First of all, I also noticed when you're talking about the client aspect that agreed. And then there's also this aspect of like north-south node in your chart that like you, Colleen, I would wonder where your north-south node is and what
Oh,
axis that is on, because the south node is like past lives and north node is like what you're doing in this life and how that's changing. Because for some of like you're talking about with the similar issues that you find in your clients quite a bit, and also some of the things that you've adventured, it is can be helpful to have those experiences to help with clients navigate through it. Or I should say, because like I'm not a counselor, so I don't tell them necessarily how to navigate through it, but holding space for them as they're navigating. And sometimes it can be helpful to share your own experiences, of course. But I have noticed that that's one of the places too that is on my north south node access with it, where you find clients with that. But I also wanted to comment too, Jules, on this idea of the adventure, because um, if you think about it from a really large viewpoint, speaking of Scorpio, the really deep, but also the really high level, the really far out viewpoint of it, of like, well, you're here as a human in this lifetime, and your spirit is here as a human in this lifetime. And if you think about that from that kind of non-attachment viewpoint of like your spirit is here, or your human self is here having these adventures, or your spirit is here having these adventures, because they're not all great adventures, and many of us can relate to that and be like, what are you talking about? But I agree, like they I think that does change the energy. And when I look at that in the context of my spirit is here having a human experience, it's like, oh yeah, maybe those are adventures for them for it to be here to learn, to see what comes out of the other side of those.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, that's how we grow and evolve. Some of us are definitely getting some extra credit in this lifetime.
Yeah.
That's what I say. For whatever reason, my
some
soul
of
is
the people listening were like,
overachiever.
yeah,
Yeah.
getting
I'm
an
like,
A with all my extra credit.
yeah, totally. Totally. But it does, I mean, you don't have to go through everything to be a compassionate healer, but it certainly helps because your compassion, like you said, Robin, it does expand when you're going through stuff. You start to look at things through a different lens. You know, I've suffered from severe chronic pain, it gives me a totally different view of what pain is and wanting people to feel comfortable, and also just even down to the pillows and the way I have my bed set up in my office is like thinking about that kind of stuff of making people feel more comfortable so that they can just relax and not have to worry about their pain when they're in my space or something like that. But yeah, I think something that came in while you were talking, Robin, was I was at this event the other day. This man, he plays piano. He does these silent concerts. His name is Murray Hidari, and it's very beautiful. He channels like some messages. He pre-writes some of the stuff that he says as a meditation, but it's also channeled simultaneously, and it creates this beautiful energy. And he does it by the ocean, so you can look at the ocean or walk through the ocean while he's playing the piano. And the theme the other night was joy. That was the theme of what he was bringing with his concert. And the message, when I closed my eyes, I was looking at all this painful suffering stuff, and not for mine, but for the collective, just things that are going on in the world right now. And then that started to shift, and I heard the other side of grief and suffering is joy. And we have to sort of have these two things happening to balance us out, right? Not that we always have to be in pain. If you look at the Buddhist, way of looking at life, life is suffering. That's just part of life. That's part of having a human experience. But we do get to choose also to be joyful and bringing in that joy. So when looking at things like the root chakra and safety and all of that stuff, well, how can I feel more safe? What brings me safety? And then addressing it with Reiki or with conversational or talk therapy or whatever the person needs in order to address that. Sometimes it's a whole bunch of combination, a team of practitioners we need to get to the root of all of the things that are going on with us. But I agree with the tools thing. I mean, Reiki has helped me through so many things in my life. I always say thank goodness for Reiki. And not just the Reiki, but all of the illumined beings and everybody that's there with me, supporting me with the Reiki energy. And I can invite them to be there. And I trust and I know that I'm never alone because I always have the support of this energy and the spiritual beings that are there with me as well. And yeah, I think it's an interesting way to look at our healing, and also can be very helpful because I'm sure people that are listening have been through a lot of adventures or experiences that have been challenging and difficult in their own lives. And maybe they're thinking about, oh, yeah, my root chakra. Huh, I haven't really paid enough attention to that. Or how do I ground more? One of my favorite affirmations is I am safe.
Oh,
I am safe. I am protected or I am supported, whatever else I need to add to that, but I am safe. I am grounded. So I had quite significant PTSD. I know last time I was here, I talked about how I got to Reiki, but one of the ways that I got to Reiki was through this bad car accident I was in. And I had pretty significant PTSD after that accident where I wasn't really understanding why. Every time I got in the car, I was so stressed out, I would get angry. Like for no reason, it would just arouse this kind of anger or frustration in me. And then I realized that was a symptom of PTSD once I finally went to speak to somebody about all these experiences I was having. It wasn't like the normal anxiety that I had previously experienced or had experience with. It was this weird anxiety, this weird stress. And so I started to just talk to myself and say, I am safe. I am safe. I am safe. And it would shift the energy. And now when I do that with Reiki, those affirmations are even more powerful. Like they just go right in there really quickly. And I say, I'm safe. And I can put like a hand on my heart and a hand on my belly. That's like my favorite position for calming down my energy. And I just say, I'm safe. I am supported, I am grounded. And anything that is feeling unsafe, it just starts to, that noise goes away. Because a lot of what we perceive as a feeling of being unsafe is really something within ourselves that's being triggered because of the energy that's out of balance or out of alignment. And so talking yourself through it could be a really great tool. And if you have Reiki, bringing in the Reiki energy and just talking with the Reiki energy. I love affirmations. I think they're super powerful and it's a great way of shifting energy. But when it comes to the root chakra, talking to that energy, I'm safe, I'm grounded, I'm supported, I belong here, whatever you want to say that feels I'm powerful can be a great one for that too. When you're feeling out of power, red is also a color connected to power. So if you think about the red business tie and what it's like a power tie. So yeah, I don't know. That's what I could go on and on and on. So
Oh, you can keep going on and on. Yeah, it's such an interesting subject because I think that it's something we all manage at all different levels and at different times and different cycles in our life too. So I think we have some cycles where we are naturally more able to be in that place of joy, even through the difficulties. Then we're in the cycles where the difficulties are so powerful that they can be very overwhelming and feel unmanageable. I know right now I'm in the middle of kind of difficult circumstances, but also on some days, like you say, the mantras, I can think, oh, I'm just overwhelmed. And then I think, no, I'm not really. If I look at it, and there's a term, I was just trying to find it, metacognitive autonomy. And that what that term means is your ability to observe yourself. And I think that's one of the things that Reiki really helps with. It can also kind of take us to the place where I feel like so many times for people, by the time they get to Reiki, they've done so many different kinds of healing modalities. What is it? Where is it? Why is it? How do I fix it? How do I move forward? How do I get in that forward motion and beyond this, or um, change to the thriving part of it? And a lot of times with Reiki, we do just have the energy of something. We've gone through the process, we know what it's about, we've looked at it, sometime ad nauseum, sometimes because it just isn't, we're just not there yet. And with Reiki, sometimes what it can do in addition is just lift it from us for us, do the healing work and relieve us of that constant having to look at it, fix it, look at it, fix it, look at it, fix it, find it, fix it. And I really liked that term, metacognitive autonomy, because what I think that's for me, what Reiki helps me do is when I can catch myself in the depth of it, I can actually stop, have Reiki help me move into just another observational, like observing my circumstance. What is this? Where is this? And then get to what is the how to? What are the tools I have? What do I need to do about this? And so one of the days, just even recently, this is such a simple one, but re recently I stepped into a space in my home and immediately went into a feeling of being overwhelmed. And then letting the Reiki help me notice I'm having this feeling and step back to observe it. What is actually real? What is from another pattern, or what is something? And then also for me, it was, what is the thought form energy in my space right now that I just walked into and have that feeling of overwhelm. And my immediate thought was, I need to clear this space.
Mm.
I need to do some energy clearing with it. So one of the tools, as we're speaking of tools, and so that awareness for me of, and maybe that's part of my Piscean nature too, as we have that as well, is that pulling back out into an observational place and then looking at it with discernment. Because I even think things like anxiety, fear, anger, some of those emotions that we often think, well, we need to just get rid of them or we need to fix it. Sometimes it's really valid information. Like sometimes we do need to be afraid, or sometimes, like you looking at the mold, for instance, whatever it was that made you look deeper, go deeper, more, keep finding, keep searching, keep looking. And then where are my solutions with this too? Because I do think sometimes that's it with like the fight or flight that you mentioned, being able to step back. Okay, I'm in fight or flight. Do I need to fight or flight? Is that real? Like, is that the reality of this circumstance?
Yeah.
Or is it a pattern? Is it something I can just let go of? Do I need to know more about it? Do I need to deep dive into this life, other lifetimes? We talk about epigenetics a lot, with that. And then on the other piece of it, how do we activate the part in us? Because I think you talked about this in what you emailed to me. How do you activate the parts where it activates your gifts, your talents, your abilities from other lifetimes, your ancestral history? What about their ability to continue to survive and then thrive?
Mhm.
And so where do those gifts and talents come from too? So anyway, I think I went into a bunch of circular talk there. So
No, it's good. I think,
And
well, it's a big topic and there's so
it
many different
is.
things to talk about. I mean, we could probably do a whole series on this and what it's connected to and how it affects us. But yeah, I think looking at what we have to appreciate from the challenges is not always easy, especially when we're in the height of it.
Yeah.
But that's something that I've also looked at of like, what is the silver lining through this difficult thing? How did it help me evolve in some way or help me help other people as well? Or appreciating our ancestors and all the struggles and challenges that they went through that helped us to be here right now in this very moment. So we often are looking at them for like, oh, thanks a lot for giving me this or that, not appreciating them as well for everything that they did in order for us to exist physically here in this moment. And that's also something that I've been doing is sending some love back to them, and thinking about them in a totally different, more loving way. Even my mother, who I had a very challenging relationship with when she was here in the physical world, really understanding her in a very different way and having such a different relationship with her since she made her transition and how we've been able to work together. And she was a healer and never really got to fulfill that. And so it's like now I get to do things that she really wanted to do. And I know that she's very happy about that. I wanted to mention something because there's a couple things that came up when you were talking. One is I know we want to talk about intuition and how we can, learn how to discern the information that's coming to us, whether it's for ourselves or for a client, et cetera. So I do want to talk about that. So I'm just saying that to remind myself to mention that. But another thing that I found a lot that can develop through these challenging experiences is the need to be in control and sometimes the need to be perfect. And those are actually coming often from a place of difficulty, challenge, trauma, whatever way you want to look at that, because control and safety go hand in hand, or at least there's a illusion of that,
Mhm.
right? And so I know for me, I can be controlling or want to control situations at times often. That's been a strong theme in my life. And why? And it's because I want to make sure that I have some influence on the safety or the feelings of safety in an environment. When you're involved in making decisions, then you can maybe help shift like what the energy is like there, right? So there's some sort of need to control. And I find, and I see this a lot with my students who need to share a lot or want to control something in the classroom, then I'm looking at them through a lens of compassion that's different for understanding that their need to control is something that I understand because that's coming from a place of pain. It's not coming because they want to be disruptive in some way or difficult or challenging. It's coming from their own challenges and they're just coming up to the surface in the Reiki training or whatever the class may be. And then as far as, how to heal that or shift that, I say I'm a recovering perfectionist, for example, because, I needed to be perfect all the time. Why did I need to be perfect? Because I felt like maybe I'd be loved more or I'd be, received better or whatever the different root causes were. They're all connected to this painful stuff. And I'm like, oh, I don't have to be perfect. I don't have to do that on that timeline and overdo it and do all this kind of stuff that I was putting myself through so much stress. And it was all created from myself, and a lot of times we don't realize that we have the power to change that. Like we burden ourselves constantly with extra responsibilities. Of course, we have responsibilities of day to day life and all of that stuff, but we can add, oh my God, my house has to be perfect. And then, you get so stressed out by it not being perfect that you get overwhelmed by that. And that leads to all these other kinds of functions that are maybe you're freezing or you're fleeing or you're doing something else in response to that. But back to the intuition thing, I feel like it's really empowering for us as Reiki practitioners and teachers to learn how to better access our intuition because it can help us with our own healing journey. And then also, it can potentially help us help others. And I don't want people to force that, like, oh, I have to be intuitive now if I'm a practitioner, because that's not what I'm looking for. It's more of asking Reiki to help you to develop your intuition or get better in touch with your intuition so that it can help to lead you to where the energy needs to go, or if you're more advanced with your intuition, how you can help yourself or the client with understanding maybe something that's painful that's gone on or a series of painful events that we can then look at how to heal that so that they're not suffering. Maybe that's now they have a chronic disease or they're having this really difficult pattern in their life and it's like they can never get back up. They're always being slammed down. That's been something that I've had to deal with. It's like every time I'm like, oh, things are great, something else happens. And I'm like, okay, now I have to get through this mountain of whatever. And so learning, different ways to look at what the root causes can help to heal the future
Mm,
because we're not attracting that stuff anymore.
yeah.
And when we heal our future, it helps to heal the descendants. You mentioned the descendants earlier that come after us. Even if we don't have our own children, it's helping to heal the environment that those children are brought into.
Yeah, and when I talk about the descendants, I think of them as not so much, I mean, I have my own blood descendants, but in the same way I think of the ancestors, the wisdom keepers of the ages that have
Yeah.
been passed down. And it's one of the things that I've really been tapping into and connecting with the descendants, again, that the collective descendants,
Yeah.
regardless of lineage. Um, and they do talk about we make it. We actually, they come back and say we do evolve, and more than we make it, we thrive out in the
Mhm.
descendants. So I've been talking to them a lot. One of the things just listening to you about some of it that I've also seen is um, people with a big category. So like that pattern of overcoming, the continual, or, when you were talking, I thought, oh, that rug being pulled out from under you experience in life, like, okay, things are going good, everything's stable, and the rug gets pulled out. And then there's the overcoming of that experience. And I know I recently had a client that energy of constantly overcoming is actually what Reiki was releasing. Is that, like, let's let go of the constant overcoming. And so when you're talking about the intuition, I think a lot of it with Reiki is the understanding that Reiki is doing the work. What our intuition shows us is the work that it's doing.
Mhm.
And it can show us that, oh, let's take the overcoming as an example. It's showing me that there's a pattern of overcoming from this lifetime, perhaps it's other lifetimes, and maybe the Reiki energy will be very specific about it. But because of our intuitive abilities or psychic impressions, we are able to actually observe, oh, Reiki is going to go in now and release that overcoming and heal that overcoming. And then also for people too, there's also the adjustment after the fact of no longer having the overcoming. Like there's almost that I'm watching for it. And then that's also another level of healing often is to release the I guess
Discomfort.
discomfort, yeah, of
Yeah.
no, yeah, the adjustment period of like, oh, that doesn't happen anymore.
Mhm.
I'm not overcoming anymore.
It can be uncomfortable when it's not there, when you're changing your patterns. And hearing both of you talk, I was like, and also the generational
Yeah.
sayings that can be passed down.
Mhm.
Like when you're talking about that overcoming, because Jules, like you talking about your generational, familial line, that's a lot of overcoming and very big overcoming. And so there can be so much of that, those generational patterns that are being shifted, but there's such a discomfort when it's not there. And that's true for a lot of things when it comes to patterns, not just overcoming. It's like, you're like, wait. And then it's almost like, do you, you have to go into this other level of support through the energy of being comfortable in that, really coming back to that root chakra, being grounded in that lack of it, right? Oh, this is a new pattern. This is a new space that I'm sitting in, and I have to I think that that can be a little bit of a misconception that it's like, okay, you release that and all of a sudden I'm free, like everything's good. We can have those experiences. So I don't want to say that those don't exist also, they do. But sometimes when those patterns are broken, sometimes when we've been doing the work and it's no longer there, that can be uncomfortable too. And that's another place that we can be really supported in is and mantras in I am safe. I liked how you were talking about that, Jules. Like, I am safe. I can be comfortable here. This is my new existence. This is my new way forward. And that also can take a little bit of work. Like that can be a little uncomfortable for a little while. And I think that's an important thing to talk about because I can even feel my body kind of tensing up through that. I would like put my shoulders up. I'm like, oh, I think that's an important thing to talk about because I think that that is one of those places that isn't necessarily always recognized, that the lack thereof needs that filling, needs that patience, needs that trust, needs that love. And, Jules, when you were talking about that mantras aspect, which I know we've kind of tried to switch into intuition, but I do feel like sometimes there's like this little bit of that fake it until you make it aspect. Like we can start with the mantras and we don't necessarily always believe it right at first, but the more that we can ground ourselves into it, the more that we can say themselves into it, you'll be really, I mean, that's part of the reason that they are there. That's part of the reason that they work, is because you are giving yourself this energy, putting energy around yourself of those words and that attraction around it. And that's another place when you're in that transition phase of releasing the patterns, being in this new pattern, that's a tool, right, that you can use of just bring these words in for yourself, even if at first you don't necessarily believe them. Eventually you do. Eventually they become a part of you. Eventually that is the space that you move into with them. And all of that is intuition. I think when we talk about intuition, we think of it in one capacity of like, that I've got this intuition around this, and I've got to make this decision and my intuition is telling me this. But intuition is so much bigger than that. Intuition is exactly like what you were both talking about, but Jules, like this is when you were saying like, oh, this is what it's showing me that needs to be worked, and we use showing proverbial, and Colleen, I know you said that too, but it's also all of the aspects that we see within our healing work. It's not just like the intuition isn't just what we are doing when we are in decision making. Intuition is what Reiki is showing us. It's when we are getting these downloads. It's when we are having these breakthroughs, or these aha moments, these different aspects of our healing journey, of our empowerment journey. It's all of that. That's all intuition encompasses, all of that. It's not just like that kind of, I feel like in our culture, we have one category that we put what we think of as intuition into, but it's actually really broad.
Yeah. I think intuition and permission go hand in hand. Like I give myself permission to open up my intuition. So that's one thing. A lot of people are scared of what they might see. Sometimes clients are scared even of like what you might see. And so I have to say, are you okay with me going in that level? Because I'm okay respecting their energetic boundaries. Too, but permission for ourselves as well to heal, going on what you were just talking about, Robin. It's like there's a reprogramming that has to happen, and that we have to be patient with ourselves to allow the process of that as part of the healing. So when I use an affirmation, like you're mentioning, it's like sometimes it clicks right away, and sometimes it takes weeks or months for me to fully embody those words and actually believe them. And one of the ones that I've been doing is I give myself permission to be peaceful. Like, what if I have a peaceful life? What does that look like? So just like putting that out there, I am peaceful. I am surrounded in peaceful experiences, or I live my life as a peaceful person, and trying to just shift energy with whatever words come into me that are attracting new forms of energy, new kinds of experiences. So I don't have to be in a state of stress, or I don't have to be in upheaval, or I don't have to constantly being surviving. Because really, that's all going back to safety and survival, and all of how that's connected. Every time, okay, I prove to myself I can overcome this, I'm surviving. Well, I want to get out of that survivor energy. I appreciate that I'm tenacious. I appreciate that I'm very strong willed and can, overcome and all of that stuff. But I also don't want to live like that all of the time. I want to give myself permission to be soft and gentle, or be cared for by others, and not always have to be self sufficient and independent and all of that kind of stuff. So that's just, yeah, a lot of different, I've been exploring all these different kind of avenues connected to this energy. And I love how it comes in when I'm working with people and trying to help them understand themselves better. Because really, that's what intuition can do, is help us understand ourselves better in situations, and allowing that information to come in and being open to it, and then using it in a useful manner that helps for healing. How can I help this person today? Or how can I help myself here? What is the root cause of this issue? And it can be many different root causes. It's not always just like one thing, like we've been discussing this whole time. So, also giving ourselves permission to go into different areas and aspects of our lives and uncover or reveal where the energy maybe needs to go. And also that we don't need to know everything or every little detail, and allowing and trusting that the energy will go to wherever it needs to go, regardless if I know exactly what that is. So I always put out in my intention of it's going to go to the things that we discussed, and also anything that's unknown to us today that needs healing. So I always add that in like my meditations or whatever. It's like anything and everything is possible here. So I'm not limiting it just because we've talked about this specific issue. And I would encourage people who are listening to listen to what they talk about, meaning a lot of our intuition is getting our attention, but we don't always pay attention to it. So when you bring up a story, or I'm a very intuitive teacher, I teach with my intuition. So I just allow things to kind of come out of me when I'm teaching. I mean, we have curriculum and all of that stuff, but I'm allowing. And so often I'll say things that are relevant to the students that are in front of me or the client that's in front of me. I brought up this story for a reason. I didn't talk about this with the 100 previous clients, but for some reason I'm sharing this story right now, and there's a reason for that. And so if we allow ourselves to just trust in the information flow and that connection to our highest self or our spirit guides, all of the above, then paying attention to what we say and how we say it is always often very relevant. So for people who are starting on their Reiki journey and wondering how to integrate their intuition, first just start paying attention to any sensations in your body, any words that come through your mouth. That could be very helpful in helping you and your client to uncover what it is that they need to work on, and how they're being helpful. We don't always know all of the different ways we're being helpful in that moment too. Sometimes it can be revealed a little bit later what things were and how they're working. As a person who has had a lot of, control, or whatever way you want to look at it in your life, I love Reiki because it lets me get out of control. Like,
Mm,
I let the Reiki drive. I let my intuition just have the experience that it's happening in that moment, and it's the most liberating thing for me.
It's
yeah,
freedom.
Yeah, because I get to just let something flow through me instead of having to steer the ship.
never
Even
thought
as
of
a
it that way.
practitioner and a facilitator and all of that, I know even when I'm going through really stressful situations, challenges, etc., Reiki has my back, the spirit world has my back. Let's go. We got to work today. So let's get through this. And if I didn't have those tools, it would be much harder, I'm sure, to function in my life. Right. But when I'm going through challenges and I'm like, whew, like last year, I was really, really sick a lot. And I was like, okay, we got to teach today. Let's go into the class. And the energy just, is there, and it happens, and it's so supportive. And for me, that's like the safest thing ever. Like,
Yeah,
I
that's an
have
interesting
something
way to
around
think of
me. Yeah.
such an interesting way to think of it because it's so true. But I guess I never really put it into those terms. And I would, consider myself similar in what you were saying, this type of person, you know? Yeah, that's interesting, Jules. I love that.
We just did a class that we actually posted today, that we are recording this one with a group in Brazil, and talking about teaching. And that was the one thing that, if we could just reassure new teachers that Reiki comes in and does the teaching just like the way you were describing. And that's what I was trying to convey to them is, you start off the day activating Reiki, and then Reiki flows through. And I love the way you talk about how each time it's different. And then I know, as the Reiki's flowing through and the conversations that come up, it's so fascinating how it's exactly what somebody in the group or class needed to hear. and a story maybe I have never told before, or maybe 3 times in however many classes, and I'm listening as I'm speaking, going, this is so highlighted, and I can hear that it's for somebody. I wonder what that will be.
Yeah.
But I wanted to add to it, I think that's one of the things that we talk a lot about is how the energy of Reiki actually empowers and advocates your intuition so that you can learn what that is for you. And and that it also will empower that ability to observe it and to notice it, and like you say, those noticing things. And that's actually, the noticing to me is a big part of the practice, and then acknowledging it. So that was something Robin talked a lot about. I remember last year of that, really getting to where you acknowledge, oh, this was my intuition. I did see it. I did feel it. I did know it, whatever style of intuition a person has. And then sometimes the little ones. So last week, I was driving and I was noticing, I was like, man, I am in green light magic. And just green light everywhere I went. And oh, that translated to parking spot magic. And
Love
so, and I know that seems like we're talking about all these really deep things, and that seems like such a little thing, but it's that act of noticing. For me, it was like, I'm not just going through all the green lights thinking, okay, good, I'm getting there on time, which that's part of it too. But that moment, and again, that word joy, like in that moment, it brought me that moment of noticing, check this out, I am in green light magic, and I'm getting where I'm going before I have to get there, because that every green light is working. So anyway, that's of course, the more lighthearted part of it.
Well, it is this
Um,
day-to-day synchronicity. Sorry, I don't know if I
no,
just
go
interrupted
ahead.
you, but it is. That's what I tell my students. Like, even just in your day-to-day life, practice using your intuition with parking or directions, or see where you feel drawn. It's not about, oh, spirit world, help me find a good parking spot, but like, I arrive with ease and I'm find a parking spot with ease, and just putting it out there. Like, I live in a big city. Los Angeles is massive. When you go out, it's like not always easy to park. So I'm like, where should I turn? And I'm just
Yeah.
open to being guided on what street to go down. And most of the time it's very efficient and it works. And they help me get into the venue, on time and all of that stuff. So, practical day to day uses is a great way of developing your intuition and asking for guidance. One of the first things is just talking to your spirit team and saying, I'm open to receiving messages. I'm open to using my intuition, and the information will start flowing. But I think I interrupted you, Colleen, so I don't want
Oh,
to
no,
go
you
on
didn't.
a whole
Yeah.
thing. But yeah, it's just it's a wonderful tool to use in your everyday life. I know a lot of students that have been training in psychic and mediumistic development with me for a long time. They say how it bolsters their confidence and helps them just make better decisions in their day to day life. And so it's quite a practical tool and very useful. And I also want to remind people that if it's happening too quickly, which sometimes people kind of freak out after a Reiki class and they're like, I'm having all these experiences and it's a little bit too much. You also have the ability to say, thank you for letting me know that my intuition is awake and open. And could you slow it down a little bit? Because you're scaring me with these experiences. Or could we do this during the daytime? Because at night it's scary. I know a lot of people, especially with mediumistic abilities, they tend to have these experiences at night, especially when we're like going to sleep or just waking up from sleep or in your dreams. and they can be frightening. And so if you're having those experiences during a Reiki training, after a Reiki training, or you feel like, oh my God, it opened me up too much, you do have free will. So you can talk to your intuition and ask it to help you in ways that you would be more receptive to. So if it's scaring you, you're scaring me in that way, but I really appreciate that you're showing me I have this new ability. So let's do it on Monday when I want to meditate, and just start kind of talking through the process. And then I find you get less and less scared when something happens later because you're like, okay, this is okay. I'm adjusting into my intuitive ability. I'm sure you guys get emails after your classes from students that are having like new intuitive experiences and kind of like freaking out about it. Or I saw all these things all of a sudden, like, what's going on? And then there's the opposite where people are like, did it work? I don't know if it's working. Is this thing on? Did I get the attunement? Because everybody else said they had these experiences and I didn't have them. And sometimes that is a learning to trust and surrender and just allowing the experience instead of that it has to be a certain way or it has to sound like my classmates' experience. And probably I didn't get the placement because I didn't have their experience and all of that kind of stuff. So when working with your intuition, in either helping to heal yourself or helping to heal others, just allowing it to be there first and foremost, giving it permission to be awake and active. And then if you feel a lot of things, like I'm very feeling oriented, I can feel physical pain, I can feel emotional pain. That's one way that I get information. I have all of my senses are open and awake. And so I get it through all different ways. But feeling, some people don't want to feel other people's pain, they don't want to feel their physical conditions in their body. So they start to panic because I'm feeling that. Well, I don't want you to shut off your clairsentience or your feeling abilities because that's really helpful, actually. Those gut feelings, those instincts are really a significant part of our intuition. But if it's too much, you can say, okay, I really appreciate that I can understand how people are feeling. Could you give it to me in a different way?
Yeah.
Like maybe your clairaudience will wake up or your clairvoyance will wake up and just talk to your spirit team, your abilities, encourage that maybe new tools come into your consciousness so that you can experience it in a different way. But I also would encourage people to remember that they're not being harmed just because they're having that intuitive experience. Sometimes people freak out. Am I taking this on myself? And when you get to the point of understanding that this is actually a very helpful tool, and now I understand what's going on in their body because I can feel it in my body and I can feel when it lifts or resolves because it goes away from my body, during the session at some point. It shouldn't be something that you carry with beyond the session. So if you're having an experience beyond the session, that's something that needs to be maybe learned how to better manage your intuition or you're taking too much on from your client. But when I get an impression through my physical being, where I feel where they have something going on in their body or I feel their emotional pain, I'm like, oh, thank you for letting me know that. It really helps me help other people. So I want to have the whole experience when I'm working with people because that helps me understand as much as possible, whether I'm doing a mediumistic experience where I'm working with the spirit world or I'm doing a psychic kind of thing where I'm working with the person in front of me or their animal or whatever the case is. It helps me to have a whole experience of what's going on because then I'm like in it and I'm like, oh, I'm in your house and this is what's going on over here, and it's pretty cool. I think it's pretty amazing, to work with all of those different things. So
Well,
I
we love
encourage
it.
people to develop it. Yeah, I know. I know who I'm in company with here, and you guys, I'm sure, can relate. How do you normally teach people to manage their intuition if it's coming on too strong for them?
Well, we do teach it in long-term courses, so to
Mhm,
gain advanced skills with it. I know you do too.
mhm.
Those are our next step courses, next step Reiki, and they're an advanced training level, although they don't have to be advanced in Reiki to receive the advanced training. But that is really one of the foundational aspects of it through learning how to journey using Reiki energy And that helps you develop your own style of intuition. Because what I find as a teacher, and one of the main reasons we developed those courses was because day one on Reiki 1, people already are receiving those kinds of intuitive impressions, and they don't know what to do with it or how to develop it or their discernment with it. The big question is it real? And the next question is, do I share this? Because I don't know anything about what I just experienced in that session with another person. And so, I think one of the important things to realize is a lot of times people think you're only born with those abilities, and the people born with them have them, and the people that, don't know what they are don't have them. And it's actually a skill to be developed. Of
Mhm.
course, some people have a greater natural aptitude, but I find in our culture, it has been so underdeveloped in us in these generations. It's becoming more normalized again, hopefully as we're raising the children. I know astrologically, we are absolutely moving into like the next 20 years of people working through intuition more, um, more commonly. The other piece I think that's important for people to realize is logical intuition is also intuition. Analytical intuition is intuition. And I think that's what I see more than anything, we see more than anything in our courses, is people don't really know what type of intuition they have, how to even understand it, and then how to build skill with it so they actually can hear themselves in their own intuition. And so developing it, sometimes people come into our next step courses already fairly developed. Other times people come in and, Reiki has just woken it up within them to even know it's there. In my generation, again, going back to that, intuition was not only underdeveloped, but it was actually suppressed. Not me personally, my parents, they didn't pay attention to it one way or another. So it wasn't specifically suppressed, but it also was considered to be, oh, that women's intuition. And there was always a little chuckle with it, like, oh yeah, women have intuition. And so it was a very dismissed part of our natural intellect. And so I do think from my own experience with developing it myself, um, on my own, and then through between my Reiki training and Reiki experience and my shamanic work, that, it of course is, now it's extraordinarily powerful. I do know how to manage it. I do know what it is, and I know how to access it, and I also know how to turn it off. Because there's not, I don't, there are many times when I'm like, yeah, I just need to not have all my intuition on. I need to just, but also I like it on when I'm walking in the street, when I'm walking in the forest, when I'm doing animal Reiki. We need our intuition. When we're working with people, we need to have that whole 360 view. And sometimes we think of that as having that viewpoint because of, we need to be paying attention to our environment, going to safety reasons. But also sometimes we want that intuition activated to see the wonder that is around us, to have that ability to notice the things that are around us and to activate it so we can even be led to it. So something simple that happened yesterday on my walk, and I go on the same walk every day, and there was an iris in bloom, which is way out of season. So beautiful. I felt like it reached out and said, hello, and caught my attention because it was such an unusual bloom. And anyway, so everything from the daily into the depths. And of course, I think all of us love those depths. That's so much of the fun of it, it's like, what else is real? In fact, when I first received Reiki, because I didn't believe in it, because I didn't believe that somebody could just pass it on to you, it's like, yeah, with no hard work, I don't know about that. Speaking of conditioning, and yeah. And so I remember, because the current was running through my arms, and thinking, wow, if this is real, what else is true? Like, what else is real? And allowing, like you say, that permission to open. And it was a process. It was still a process. I would say I had so much to unlearn because of my cultural conditioning, that culturally created self we talk about. And again, past lives. And also, I do think that for many of us born into lineages where we are genetically intuitive, also, it was very practical for the grandmothers to teach the children, don't let people see that about you,
Mm.
because of the fear of persecution that we faced. And, or you're going to be seen as weird, or that safety thing that you're talking about, both from persecution, but also belonging, fitting in. I watched it in my oldest granddaughter, very empathic, very intuitive. And I watched it as she got older in school. A lot of it didn't come from her parents, it came from her peers. And watching her try to navigate through her experiences with me as a grandmother in the fairy realms, fire walks, the spiritual realms that she was raised with, and then going into, to her, what were normal conversations with her peers. They're like, well, fairies aren't real. You can't walk on fire. She's like, I saw my grandmother. So she walks on fire. So it can be done. But watching her navigate through that, watching Robin navigate through it, and again, growing up through peer pressure, peer pressure around it all, and that sense of belonging, and where are you safe, which is why we love our communities, right?
Mhm.
Because we can be in these groups and talk about all these things, and in our groups it's safe, and we can be comfortable, and we can develop it and become that ability that is not only an aptitude but a curiosity. Like, I love the curiosity of it. I love the fascination with it. I love the ability to go on my walks, activate it, and think about, ooh, what's all around me when the flowers say hello. Or Luna's soccer game the other day, Robin, I had to crack up with all the dandelions.
Mhm.
Well, even the curiosity of the human condition and everything that people have been through, I think that's always fascinated me. Like, I was studying sociology and psychology in college because just the human mind and the human experience has always been so fascinating to me. And that inquisitiveness can help you with your intuition. So when you're looking at people, that can help you also dig in a little bit more intuitively, but also the compassion that we were talking about and how that can evolve within us. I feel like looking at people and all of their lived experiences and what they've been through has helped me to be an even more compassionate person doing this work and understanding that everybody's been through challenges. Everybody's been through difficulties at different levels. It's not a competition for who's had the most pain or anything like that in life, but understanding that as humans, we have suffered on some level, and how do we help to overcome that suffering? How do we help to reprogram ourselves so we don't have to continue to suffer? How do we help heal the previous generations and give gratitude and all of that to them? And then that helps us in turn heal ourselves and also the future generations. and how our intuition plays a role in that. And even just going back to the root chakra and everything that we started talking about here, how to understand better where there are energetic imbalances within ourselves or within our clients or our students or whatever is going on, however we're using this. It can help us to more effectively get to the root cause of the healing and then ultimately have give people more successful outcomes, I would say, in on their healing journey. Because I don't know about you, but I always feel empowered when I have the knowledge, like the knowing of something. Then okay, now I can solve this problem.
Yeah.
Again, going back to it, like when people come in and they're like, I don't know why I can't seem to find a successful relationship or whatever the issue is that they're going through. Well, let's take a look. What's going on? Where was there a feeling of maybe not being worthy of love? And where did that start from? Or whatever the pattern is that's there, let's address it and let's go into it. And I know we've talked about before, Colleen, like timeline healing. I know there's different techniques in shamanism, there's techniques that you can do with Reiki, and looking at where things got stuck or where things started, whatever way you want to look at that, and how to undo that pattern or that programming can ultimately heal anything that's out of balance or out of alignment in our energetic system. Because a lot of our experiences, they get stuck in different places energetically, whether that's in our auric field or inside the body or both. Usually it's both. And then ultimately they manifest into some condition or some struggle that we're having now, and then addressing that. So intuitively, I might look at somebody's timeline and say, okay, I'm drawn to the age of 16. I may or may not get the exact specific thing that happened at 16 years old, but I might get a feeling around what it is. Or I might just say, I'm drawn to the age of 16. This feels like when it started. And then it immediately like opens up awareness for the client often, where they're like, yeah, 16 was a really tough year. My family moved, or my parents got divorced, or whatever happened in their life. And it starts to open up this, kind of thing to identify, oh, this is what it is. Or if it's a past life thing, I'm feeling this thing. We can't always say yes or no to past life stuff when somebody's telling us about it intuitively, but you might feel a sensation in your body. If I'm talking about this, do you feel something? Does it resonate with you on some level, whether or not it makes sense to you? And then we might need to go there. Or there's like a pattern, and I can see we're at age 23, we're at age 24. So this went on for a few years, I see in this pattern, and it started there, or it started at age 3. I know one of a client that I'm working with now had a serious health issue right after she was born, going back to the root chakra stuff. Right after she was born, she was in braces and had she couldn't move for like the first year of her life because of something that was going on with her body. And her feeling guilty, the stress that she put on her mom. Isn't that amazing how empathetic we are as children, how we feel that like, oh, I've stressed out my mom, or she's really upset because of all the things that I'm going through, or my health is affecting my whole family. We can feel that, especially those of us who are extra sensitive. And that was this theme throughout her life, that she was a burden, and that developed into this whole cancer thing that she's been dealing with now. But there's so many layers and levels connected to that. And so we've been working on this life, past lives, ancestral stuff. It's all of it that culminated and ended up into a physical condition in her body. But she's so brave and courageous to like want to look at all of that stuff.
Mhm.
Because a lot of us don't even want to go there, like me.
Right. Like, could I not?
So
Is it gonna
as
hurt?
a practitioner, yeah, it's like it's a balance of being sensitive, because like I don't want to push somebody to address something that they're not ready to heal or work with. So also being compassionate through your healing, and when you're working with somebody, if they're having some kind of reaction that feels uncomfortable, having the discernment and the awareness, I don't need to open that door fully today. Or even just telling people it's okay if it doesn't feel like today is the right time to go there. 'Cause
Yeah.
sometimes we don't know. We think, yeah, I want to heal everything. We want to push ourselves through whatever. And it's like, maybe that isn't ready to heal today. And I don't know if you've experienced this with spirit attachment, Colleen, but often they leave easily, but sometimes they don't. And when they don't, I find that that's something within the person that is not ready to let that energy go. And so it's not that you're doing something wrong necessarily as the practitioner, it's really having to undo deeper levels of what manifested this in the first place. And then that will let go. But they have to participate in that, the client, and be willing to go into the state of allowing, giving permission for themselves to heal. And ultimately, that will help to relieve themselves of whatever this attachment or this energy is that doesn't belong there. And that's having an effect on them. Because spirit attachment is real. I know we both agree on that, or we all agree on that, right? Spirit attachment can be very real and have a very profound effect on people's mental, physical, emotional, spiritual well being. At the end of the day, it's really a permission thing, right? So we may not be conscious that we gave this thing permission to attach to ourselves. Maybe we were just really stressed out or we're going through something, and on a subconscious level, it allowed the attachment to take place. But then it's a learning from, like, why did this take place and how do I let it go? And then I want to let it go. And actually, it's not comfortable. I've had people come to me and they have a very wonderful self-awareness. I've had this attachment for 20 years, and I'm not, like, poo-pooing that. If somebody calls me and says, "I have a spirit attachment," I'm not immediately like, "Okay," because some of those calls can be a little bit strange, from people, or they wanna blame everything that's going wrong in their life on something else external, right? But I'm very open, and in one of these instances, I realized that he really was so comfortable with it that even though it made him really uncomfortable, going back to all these other things that we put off up with in our life, well, that discomfort is what I know. So I don't know how to give these things permission to let go because I'm so comfortable with them being there. What does my life look like without this disturbance, without
Really
this discomfort?
interesting, Jules. I had almost the exact same thing show up I mean, relatively recently. It was like maybe it was within the last couple months, not for me, but with a client. That's interesting. Of like that long term, you know, with that. So, and cords too. You can see that with cords, especially to family members, and whether that is a good relationship or not. You can see that with cords where it's like, who am I without this cord?
Hmm.
And the willingness to be able to release it, because whether it's comfort or discomfort or the um the different how complicated it can be, especially if it's in a hard relationship or complicated relationship or traumatic relationship, those as well. And the other thing that can show up too is with spirit attachment is like it can come after multiple sessions. It's like, well, why didn't this show up right away? That it's there, and because it's not a new attachment. Like, why didn't this show up right away? But the fact that you have to release a layer. It's like the onion, you release a layer, you release a layer, and then it's finally able to be found. It's finally able to be revealed, because that's a common enough experience with spirit attachments that can be a part of it as well. And sometimes they show up in the first session, like right away, but other times it's interesting how that can happen as well with them, and that it was only going to be possible to find that attachment because of these other things that were kind of hiding it that needed to be released first, and that readiness, like you were saying.
And I would also add that conversely, sometimes the Reiki energy just comes in and releases what they need to let go of
Yeah, it's true.
peacefully, gently, and without all the work.
Yeah.
And also come in and, like, you know, I'll say to people sometimes, well, you've already said yes. And it's the yes that gives the permission. And then also allows the Reiki energy to help them heal it the way that is in their best interest or best benefit at that time. And sometimes they have already gone through all of the what is it, why is it, how is it, everything else, and they just need the energy of it released. And sometimes they're not in a place ready to be able to go into the depth, but they need the energy released, and Reiki will do that too. So it goes all the different ways of that, releasing and healing. And then, of course, ultimately what that does is reveals who we really are without the injuries to us, without the energetic or physical or mental, emotional, spiritual injuries that we can sustain. It can clear away. We call them layers. One of the descriptions of it that I've liked is like wet quilts stuck over your head, and each one gets pulled off and gets pulled off, and finally you're released from that. But I have also commonly enough seen it where the Reiki energy just does the releasing. They know what they need to know about it, or it will help them know what they need to know after it's all released and they're free of it and can move forward on their path to, enjoy their way to the adjustment, like to be in that joyful moment of their adjustment. And then sometimes, of course, it's the kind of, like you guys were talking, a little bit of learning how to live without that. Because as you were talking about spirit attachments, I have definitely seen where it is part of the identity of the actual person, where the spirit attachment becomes enough to where they think of it as their own personality or their own identity, and then having to adapt to themselves. Um, for instance, if they think of that spirit attachment may give them patterns of voice, for instance, well, now what do I say without that? Because it's the energy coming in with the voice. Well, what's my voice without it? So it's Reiki is so miraculous in the way that it adapts to us. One of the other things I wanted to be sure to bring up is also some of this stuff, because I want to talk about your Egypt trip too. One of the things that I think is so important to realize is that just because we have the healing does not mean that we always understand it for a length of time. And I was relating that earlier to you, but also to Robin in another conversation about, it's been a year since I went to Egypt, and which is astonishing in itself that was a year ago. But I would say I am just now starting to integrate and understand the experiences of it, and those intuitive experiences, that heart-to-heart connection with the land, the heart-to-heart connection with the ancient teachings, the ancient, just, being there, everything is so ancient and so, like, it's almost like when you see the Grand Canyon and you see the layers of history. It's like in Egypt, it's that ancient history of humanity. And so anyway, I know you went to Egypt last year and you're going again, taking another group again this year. So I wanted to kind of segue into that with those experiences, because I remember talking with Karen recently about understanding how our broadcast of love from there really matters. Anyway, why don't you share about you and some of that with your experience of it as well? Because
Yeah.
I know for you, it's a really deep land energetic experience.
Yeah. Yes, I will definitely talk about Egypt. And I just wanted to add on to what you guys were both saying about healing and things that we've been discussing today is that it's a cumulative effect. Sometimes people want an instantaneous result because we're in this instant gratification kind of phase as humans,
Yeah.
like I can have everything on demand. But just a reminder that healing is a process and that it takes time and often it takes effort to reveal different layers. And some of it is effortless and some of it is effortful when we're doing the healing work. But just to be patient with your own process and your own journey, and that can be a lifelong journey. I feel like we're here having a human experience because we're here to both heal and go through these difficulties, but also to have joyful experiences that maybe we wouldn't have in a different form or in a different dimension or plane of existence. So there's nothing like human touch or the food or going to places like Egypt and touching the land and all of that kind of stuff. Egypt. So Egypt was on my list for a long time. There are certain parts of the world. So I'm a very frequent traveler, and I've gotten to travel to I don't know how many countries. I'd probably have to write it down at some point. But I hadn't made it to Egypt yet. I'd been close to the border of Egypt and never gone into the country. And then my friend proposed that I co host a trip with her. So we went earlier this year in February, and it was quite magical. The Middle East and that whole region just feels like home to me. There's something very peaceful in my soul, even with all the chaotic environment and things that are going on. I always just feel at home. There's only a couple places in the world that I've had this experience. And one of the people who was on my trip this year said, "Why don't you look at your astrocartography?" And sure
Yeah.
enough, most of my lines are going through the Middle East. It's like one through Europe, and that one is in the UK, which is the only other place I feel I've felt like, oh, I'm at home here. Anyway, so just kind of a side note. And I've traveled to several countries in the Middle East before, so I was very excited. I love the food, I love the culture, but there was always something deeper calling me to Egypt. It just felt like I've lived in that land at least, probably several lifetimes, but I've lived there before. And when I arrived, I just felt this, I'm here, kind of, I'm home in some way. And throughout that trip, as I was exploring Egypt, it just felt like everybody was, commenting that I looked Egyptian. I know that sounds strange because I'm very fair in skin, but they said, oh, but the people from Alexandria are more fair skinned and they have red hair. That's what I kept hearing from everybody there. So I got a lot of wonderful attention, which was also really nice. But I just felt like this sense of belonging. And I would go to especially some of the pyramids, they really had an effect on me. The Sphinx was really profound. I really had an incredible experience there. But where I would just get these clairvoyant impressions or different feelings of like, ooh, I feel the energy of what's happened here over time. And talk about layers and revealing layers. I mean, there's so much that they still haven't even uncovered of history there. It's underneath sand, I mean, it's just sand everywhere you look in some areas, but there's so much even around the Great Pyramids that has yet to be uncovered. So everywhere you go, they're digging new things. And I know our guide was mentioning, oh, that wasn't here like 2 weeks ago when I was here. They had just found something new. So that in itself is really extraordinary. I definitely connect to ancient lands and ancient civilizations and ancient history. I was always a big fan of that in school, but just feeling the energy of all of these places. And I don't know if you had this experience, Colleen, but did you go to the Kamombo temple, the crocodile temple? I think you did.
Yes.
I was like, whoa, the energy here is really light and really dark at the same time. Like you could feel like that they had done some kind of ritual and there was some like definitely some darker, heavy past energy there. And then you could also feel the energy of the priests that did a lot of light work in there. So it was like duality on steroids. That's what I felt specifically in that temple. And it was just very profound. And I would go in with an open-hearted, intuitive experience and kind of tune out the guide. And then I would ask him, like, oh, did this happen here? And then he would fill me in on some stuff. And that happened at one of the pyramids that we went to, actually, in Dashur, which is like lesser known pyramids further out than Giza. We went there, and we were walking around the outside of the pyramid with this guide, and she took us to this spot, and she just stopped, and we were meant to just look around. And all of a sudden I had these clairvoyant experiences of seeing these women that were exceptionally tall, actually, and they were wearing these kind of white cloth or robes, and they were carrying on stretchers, dead, people that had transitioned, that were dead. And there were flowers and stones and beautiful decorations around the bodies. And I said, what is this place? And she said, oh, it's a funerary. It's where they prepared the dead. And I was like, oh, okay, well, this is what I saw. And she was cool, and she was totally open to that. And I said, did they put flowers and decorate, and this didn't feel like it was synonymous with the sarcophagi and like how they would dress up the dead. It didn't feel like a mummification process. And she said, oh yeah, they definitely, did all of that stuff. And it was just so cool. It was like I could feel the energy. And I also felt so much feminine energy in certain
Yes.
areas, and the power of the feminine energy that was in that land. And it shifted, obviously. I think with Ramses II, that more patriarchal kind of energy came in a lot, but it was very like Queen Hatshepsut and Hathor, and then that evolved into Isis and all these deities. There was a balance of masculine and feminine energy, but there was definitely a very strong feminine energy that I felt in a lot of the places, and the reverence for the female energy that existed, and I think that's probably changed over time just with society and influence from external things. But I thought that that was so powerful. And so we took a group there in February of this year, and we did different meditations and healing experiences in the temples, and we had private time in the pyramids and the pause of the Sphinx, and it was just so powerful. And my colleague Kelly Eckhart, that co-hosted the trip with me, we did like psychic and mediumship readings, and we got to do those on our Nile River cruise, when you're just like looking outside and you're like, yeah, I'm on the Nile River right now, just doing a psychic reading or something like that. Like, it was just so cool. And then we stayed at the Mena House. I know you stayed there too, which I loved, just being right on top of the pyramids right there. And we did readings sitting right next to the pyramids, and we're like, in the hotel, but we're right next to the pyramids there. And you just have this view of the Great Pyramid of Giza right in front of you. And we're like doing these readings, and it was very powerful and profound. And a lot of people were having healing experiences. And there were people that came through me that were students of Reiki, practitioners of Reiki, etc. So we were filling everywhere with Reiki. We were leaving Reiki trails everywhere around Egypt,
right?
and like giving Reiki to everything that we possibly could. And then there were people that were newer to spirituality in our group too. So that was also interesting to see them evolve and get more comfortable on the trip. One of the people, she was new to me, she came through Kelly. She had broken her arm right before she came on the trip, and she was having a bunch of swelling in her arm. And so Reiki was a wonderful tool for on the spot, like first aid, right? Like, it's just like, okay, I'm going to give you some Reiki. Are you open to it? And she's like, yeah. And so I gave her maybe 15 minutes of Reiki while we're waiting to board our flight, sitting in the airport. And she comes to me later and she's like, Jules, is it possible that this just healed my arm? Is this possible? And it was so fun to see people that are new to healing, and the excitement and the next day she's like, my arm is better. There's no healing. And she was so like impressed that it was possible that something like that could help her, especially just within a few minutes standing at a gate waiting to board a flight at 6 a.m. So that was super cool. And just being open and experiencing the energy and feeling like the pyramids at Saqqara, they were like soaking up the energy of Reiki. And it felt like that pyramid, the step pyramid, it felt like it was breathing to us. Like, that one was just so cool, I thought. And that one's older again than the Great Pyramids of Giza. But in the Great Pyramid, we were chanting, and we were chanting Karuna Reiki symbols in the Queen's Chamber. We went down in there, and in the King's Chamber, I did this whole. Actually did an animal Reiki experience, and we were chanting for the chakras and opening up all of this stuff too, which was like a really cool experience. So, if anybody's interested in going to Egypt, I have another trip next year. We get to see a whole lot, and everything is really well taken care of. Our guides and the tour operator were absolutely fantastic. And that is February 26th to March 9th. And then we have an extension for people that are interested in exploring a little bit more of Egypt. We're going to the Siwa Oasis area in Alexandria this time for an extra 5 days. If people want to go from March 9th to the 15th, there's an extension. So yeah, I'm excited. I'm like, even just talking
It's
about
like,
it, I'm like, I can't wait to go back. It was just such an extraordinary experience. And it's always interesting to me when people are like, oh, I went to Egypt and I got sick, or I did this, and they're, talking about safety. I also want to tell people that we were so safe, and they took such good care of us, and never felt unsafe anywhere, and everything was really incredible. And we went this year, so it's during the war that's happening next door, and nothing was affecting our situation in Egypt. So whether you go with me or somebody else, I just want you to know that you're safe to go over there, and just be in good hands, in a good care of a tour company. I would probably recommend going on a tour unless you have family or something there that can show you around. But it was extraordinary.
yeah, I thought the same thing. I felt very safe. I felt very taken care of. And also, as a fairly experienced traveler, I did appreciate being with not only our group, but our group was with a tour group in Egypt that just managed everything. They knew there's so much security in Egypt. Everywhere you go, they're monitoring the security. So, but I never felt that. Like I never felt like it was intrusive or anything. It just felt comfortable. And
Yeah.
of course, the food is fabulous.
See, yeah, I loved the food. As a vegetarian, there was so much to eat, and our tour operator was always like, "Yes, you can eat here. No, don't eat here." Like they were really not for don't eat anything, but vegetables. I'm a vegetarian. It was like, I want to have a salad at some point. I thought I was going to have to go 2 weeks without a salad. And everybody on our group, I think one person had a tummy, or two people had a little bit of a tummy thing. It went away like really fast. We just had an overall like perfect experience. So I'm hoping to recreate this wonderful energy of our group, all really blended well together and became friends, and everything was just so positive, and the people there are very warm and nice and generous and kind and loving. And if you understand the culture, and that this is just a cultural thing, when they come up and approach you or try to get you to buy something or want to bargain with you or whatever the case may be, it's part of the culture, and not to worry about that. I was like the head haggler for everybody in our group, getting everybody the good deals on stuff.
Right. Well, they certainly are friendly with it. Like I never felt uncomfortable with it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's incredible. I really feel like, I mean, really all of us at some point on a human level came from Africa. If you look at the way that human evolution has gone. And so there's probably something for most people when they go back there. But I know a lot of people look at the Egyptian deities and have some sort of connection, or some Egyptology, and they have some sort of connection to it. So if you're interested, I would love to have you join us next year. We still have some space available.
And they find you at healingwithjules.com.
Yeah, and everything is laid out there. There's an itinerary that's very detailed and thorough on my site, as well as we did a Q&A Zoom call with people to go over everything about the trip and what they could potentially experience, and just to give as much information as possible. So that's also on there, a video that they can watch about it.
Well, Jules, absolutely fun discussion today.
Mm.
And for any of you listening, um, you can find Jules in multiple ways. Go to her website to find the various resources that she provides, classes she teaches, psychic development, mediumship, Reiki, animal Reiki. And did I leave anything out?
And I have mentorship programs for those who want to develop their intuition and integrate it more with Reiki. I think we do something similar but different, too. So those could be complementary for people who want to explore a little bit more or learn some additional tools.
And your social
Fantastic.
media?
They can find me at Medium Jules on TikTok and Instagram, and at Auralux Reiki on Instagram as well, and Facebook.
Perfect. All right. Well, everybody, thank you so much. Jules, thank you for being here with us. And this, as Colleen said, wonderful conversation. And we're, of course, at ReikiLifestyle.com. My social media is a little different. I'm at Robin Benelli Reiki, and I'm mostly on Instagram. So you can find me there. All
I
right.
guess I should say just two more things. Both William and I are still teaching in Japan this year. I think that will happen right after this podcast is released in the end of October and November on Mount Karama, both a master class and a Corona class. I'm also teaching a Reiki 1 and 2 there. So with Lena and Munikai. And then also William and I are teaching a 7-day Reiki, Corona Reiki class in Hawaii in February. And then Robin and I start our classes, our next step classes, and our Explore the 12 Heavens class in January. As you said, it's all on Reiki Lifestyle. So,
Thank you.
Jules, thank you so much. What a great conversation and really important discussions, I think, for people to have just that awareness, that self-awareness of possibilities for them healing. Yeah. And Robin, thank you. And listeners, thank you.
And we'll see you all next time.
Yep.
Great. Bye now.
Bye.